Okay. I think it was 1964 by now. I just got out of Long Bay Jail for doing 3 months of vagrancy, and I got a job in Sydney as a printer's assistant. But I quit after 4 weeks, and then I lost my pay at the racetrack, so I moved back to Fagan Jack's for a week. The kids that I'd known there before had gone, and the new one there seemed as sneaky as me, so we never talked. One morning Jack tried to fondle me. We wrestled until I broke free, but it annoyed me, and I thought, I've had enough of this joint. I'll piss off soon. One day as I was asleep, I woke up and I noticed that Jack was furtively hiding his bank passbook in a place he thought was secret. And then he said he was going to the radio shop to get a valve for his radio, and I calculated he'd be gone for about 45 minutes. Now, in 64, before computers buggered up the forger's art, you could withdraw dough from the bank by handing the teller a bank book and a signed withdrawal form. So I took Jack's book from its hiding place and I ran to the bank, and I didn't want to take all his money. You know, he wasn't a bad bloke. So after forging his signature, I withdrew 120 quid, which nowadays might be $1,000, from his 350 quid, $3,000 account. I returned the book to its hiding place and I ran to the train station. Jack would expect me to get that night's express. So to fool him, I got a suburban train to Camden. You know, I was a bit over wary because Jack wouldn't have chased me anyway, and he probably wouldn't have discovered the bank book had been used for a week. Anyway, I got a suburban train to Camden, and in a coffee shop I fed the jukebox and I studied the racing form and I winked at girls, and that night I booked a berth on the Melbourne Express, and I sat there on the train and meditated on how good elation actually felt. I'm in a sleeping berth with tons of dough. Sure feels good to travel legit. I lay watching quaint old country stations whiz past, and I thought to myself, one day I'll share this sleeping berth with a lover. I sure hope it happens soon. We changed trains at Albury, and I went to take a leak, and on the washroom floor I found a wallet, and inside was 80 quid. I was rich. So when I got to Melbourne, I got a hotel room and started going to the races and the greyhound races. I did not trust illegal off-course gambling joints to pay if I won, and I didn't know where any were anyway. So in the days before totalisator betting, I actually went to the tracks and imagined that I was a Damon Runyon character. Well, I was pretty lucky, and it lasted 2 months. But finally, one cold night at the dog track, down to my last, what would have been $15 nowadays, I bet on a 10-1 shot. The dog was fifth with 200 metres to go, so I started shuffling towards the exit, and then the race caller mentioned my dog with animation, so I stopped. It swept past the others and won by a nose, and I was still a punter. In the wee small hours, I'd go to a Flinders Street all-night cafe called the Pieteria, and I kept hoping to run into beatniks. And one night, a guy that looked a tiny bit like a beatnik, he said to me, "I'll take you to a jazz joint. I'll show you where it is. There's beatniks there. The place really swings," he promised. And as we walked across Yarra River Bridge, he said, "Geez, I need a pee. There's a dunny down by that path down by the river. I don't feel safe going there at night. Could you come and stand guard for me?" Now, I didn't want to appear paranoid because this guy might lead me to something good. So I thought, oh, if he tries anything, I'll just kick him and then run. And I was about to, he entered the dunny, and just as I was about to stand outside, I saw through a big space at the bottom of the door 2 sets of feet. My new pal said, "Come in here, mate, see what I've got." And I reversed away and I broke the record for the 100-metre sprint, and I crossed the bridge in 5 seconds, and I ran half a mile to my hotel in 2 minutes and laying warm and safe in bed. I wondered if the Guinness Book of Records had a category for kids fleeing dunny killers. And a few days later, I lost all my money at the races, and I walked back to the city, and I wondered, what next? Sydney or Adelaide? I miss Adelaide, but I'll toss a penny and let fate decide. So I started hitching to Sydney, and by the time I got to Sydney, I was a little insane from hunger. I couldn't go to my old Rushcutter Bay tennis shed as a tough-looking bum was camping in it, and I was terribly afraid of getting busted for vagrancy again. So I took a chance on sleeping in the old coffin out the backyard of Jack the Fagan's. Now, he never went out at night, and if he did so, it was too dark to see. If I left before sunup, I'd go unnoticed. So for the next 6 days, I slept in the box of death, imagining that I was a vampire. Despite being right next to Jack's place, it was warm and I felt secure. But one night, someone pulled me out of the coffin and slammed me up against a wall. It was Crippled Bob. He was holding me with one hand and slapping me with the other. And holding a torch next to him was Jack Fagan. They dragged me upstairs, and Bob was called Cripple, but he didn't limp. He was about 30 years old, a shaven-headed petty thief with Chinese features, and a good pal of Jack the Fagan's. And Cripple Jack shook me and he said, "Where's our dough?" And I said to Jack, "Oh, it wasn't me." And he said, "Yeah, it was bloody you, mate." And he slapped me again. He didn't punch me. I said, "I'll pay you back, mate. I get paid Thursday. I'm working as a cleaner." And I thought to myself, it's going to be okay. Jack will cop my story. But Crippled Bob punched me in the guts, and he turned out my pockets, and they were empty. So he punched me hard in the face, and I fell backwards onto a table. And he said, "Half that dough you took was mine, you shit." And he took out a knife, and my stomach tightened, and I thought, I'm going to die if I don't get physical. It was a hot summer night. Jack's open window had no fly screen, so I rolled backwards through the cutlery and out the window. Beneath was the roof of the ground floor, so I rolled to the gutter and leapt down and ran into Crown Street. And Crippled Bob was yelling something out like threats, so I headed to Oxford Street. I thought to myself, I'll be safe near people. Bob won't want any witnesses. There weren't many people around about 3 a.m. And after running all the way to Hyde Park, which was about 2 kilometres, I rested, and me ill-fitting desert boots were slippery with sweat. So I ran into the park and hid behind a tree. And I didn't even know if Crippled Bob was nearby. Maybe he'd chased me, maybe he hadn't. But I thought to myself, I can handle Jack the Fagan, but if Crippled Bob's near, I'll need a weapon. So I picked up a broken bottle with a jagged neck, and I felt like the guy in West Side Story, because to not shake with fright, I'd just go psycho. That was a habit I had, going psycho if I felt fear. So I whispered the song, when you're a jet all the way from your first cigarette to your last dying day. I was now a dangerous hoodlum, and I snuck through the trees, nerves tuned for attack, broken bottle giving me courage. Near Elizabeth Street, I peeked out. Bob and Fagin were nowhere in sight, so I headed for the cross. I needed sleep. If that tough bum was still sleeping in my Rushcutter Bay tennis shed, I'd sleep in the old wooden grandstand nearby. Next night I was preparing to go back to Adelaide when a middle-aged bearded bloke with a guitar joined me in the grandstand. All right, this is all for today. I'll tell you the rest tomorrow.